Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us this evening. My name is Zane Kessler. I'm the Director of Government Relations at the Colorado River District based in Glenwood Springs. And sorry that we couldn't be together in person tonight. We look forward to the event tonight in the program and look forward to getting back to some in-person State of the River meetings in the coming year, as well as some additional in-person meetings that we're planning for this summer and fall in the Gunnison River Basin. So welcome, thank you for being here. My job right now is just to go over a few basic housekeeping items before we get started. First, questions will be answered at the end of the event. We're going to have a Q&A session with panelists at the end of the presentations this evening. You can use that Q&A function in the bottom of your screen to ask questions throughout the program, and we'll be tracking those and try to get to as many of those as possible at the end of the event. If we're not able to answer your questions tonight, we will provide email addresses for our staff as well as our presenters this evening. Those email addresses will be posted in the chat box at the bottom of your screen at the end of the event. We'll also provide links to additional information on the topics we discussed this evening in that chat box. So keep an eye on that for additional information and links that you can go out and do your own homework and learn up on some of these often complicated issues, but very important issues that we're going to be discussing tonight. So with that, I'm going to introduce one of our newest colleagues at the River District. Marielle Cowden is with us this evening. She's our new director of public relations. And within that role, she's going to be overseeing our outreach to communities throughout the district, including the Gunnison River Basin. Marielle is a great addition to our team and is going to help us move forward and really grow and up our game when it comes to our media, our social media, and our outreach to the communities that we serve on the Western Slope. So I think Marielle was going to give us a brief intro of the district and a brief introduction of herself. So I'll turn it over to Marielle now. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks so much, Zane, and thanks to everyone for being here tonight. Good evening, and as Zane mentioned, my name is Marielle Cowden, and I'm the new Director of Public Relations for the Colorado River District. I couldn't be more excited to be joining a really incredible team of people and an incredible community in Western Colorado. Colorado is actually where I grew up, and after living for a number of years now in the Pacific Northwest, I'm thrilled to be coming home to help keep water on the Western Slope. That is, after all, what the Colorado River District is all about. Next slide, please, Alicia. The Colorado River District was formed over 80 years ago to protect West Slope water users. The mission in broad terms is to lead in the protection, conservation, use, and development of the water resources of the Colorado Basin. Next slide, please. The district serves 15 Western Colorado counties. It represents approximately 500,000 people in an area covering nearly 1/3 of the state. And the River District's boundaries include all of the Colorado main stem and the basins of its major tributaries, which include the Yampa, the White, the Green, the Dolores, the Uncompahgre, and of course, the Gunnison, which is why we're here today. Next slide, please, Alicia. Because this is your water, this is your Colorado River, and we are your Colorado River District. With that, I'm honored to introduce our first presenter of the evening, Mr. Bob Herford of Colorado's Division of Water Resources. Bob is the division engineer for Water Division 4, the Gunnison River Basin. Bob manages a team in the administration of water rights and implementation of the hydrography and dam safety programs, and works directly with the water court and the general public. We're so glad to have him here to present on the Gunnison River's hydrology and water supply today. Bob, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I've always looked forward to this. I missed it last year. I've got pretty few number of slides to go over, and but I'm going to keep track of my time. I get accused of always trying to stuff 10 pounds into a 5-pound sack. So this first slide I've got shown up here is actually a photograph of where Blue Mesa Reservoir is actually supposed to be. So my presentation is going to be kind of an indicator of how my quantification of water supply this season will shake out in the Gunnison Basin. Sometimes engineers really maybe aren't that useful. You already know you're in a hole, and we just really just tell you how deep you are. my presentation outline and is broken up like this. I'm going to give you an introduction, and especially for those of you who are maybe first timers to the State of the Rivers meeting, give you the lay of the land and the sub basins that make up our portion of the Gunnison River. Then I'm going to get into more into water supply and more specifically snowpack and how crucial that is. Then we'll walk through our sub basins and explain how some of the parts and pieces work and maybe what it means to you and what it means to the water users in those basins this year. And then, you know, maybe have a little look ahead at what we might expect. So the state of Colorado is broken up into 7 hydrologic basins, and we are here in Division 4. Now, water supply can best be characterized, I would say, as what we have is base flows in our streams, water stored in our reservoirs, and also the annual snowpack accumulation each season. We track this data closely to enable us to assess water supply conditions each year. And as you may or may not know, it's snowpack. That's our main source. That's our biggest reservoir. Now, here's a close-up of the Gunnison Basin. And in the Gunnison Basin, we rely on a number of SNOTEL measuring stations. These are NRCS measuring stations that are set up in the high country all over the state, actually. And we use these to track snowpack. And what I've shown, these red dots, and these where they're actually scattered around our division. And these big ovals that I've drawn are really our main subbasins. So the upper Gunnison makes up most of the water in the basin, yields the most water in the basin. And you would expect that. This continental divide up here, these are all the 14ers are, and that's where most of that snowpack accumulates. Next would be the North Fork at about 1/3 of a million acre feet on average annually. And it's also rimmed by a bunch of 14ers. And then finally, the Uncompahgre. And that river runs from the south in the San Juan Mountains north and joins, has its confluence with the Gunnison at the city of Delta. And a little bit later, I'll be talking about this light colored stretch of lower Gunnison River. This is endangered fish, critical habitat for endangered fish, and it affects the operations of the Aspinall unit, specifically Blue Mesa Reservoir. Okay, now, so for those of you who haven't seen this slide before, I think I've showed this multiple times at previous State of the Rivers meeting, but it's a kind of important. This is what a SNOTEL site looks like. It's got a bunch of sensors, gauges, and telemetry, and it measures the weight of the snow as it sits on top of this, what we call a snow pillow, and converts that into inches of water equivalent, transmits that data to a website. And often this is what it looks like in the wintertime. This is up on the Grand Mesa. And at this SNOTEL site, what we'll do is normally check the calibration. We'll go up there with this snow measuring equipment, this snow tube, and especially calibrated scale. And we'll take 3 snow cores, measure those, average that out, and compare that with what the SNOTEL gauges are reading. Sometimes they could be off as much as 10%, but that's when the NRCS will come back and make some adjustments. So water supply. Let's talk about the upper Gunnison. Specifically, well, I'm looking at the SNOTEL gauges that measure the snow runoff, the runoff into Blue Mesa Reservoir. So that purple line on the top, that's what we would normally expect, inches of water sitting above Blue Mesa Reservoir in an average year, close to 18 inches of water. And last year, you see that it really wasn't that bad, 92% of the seasonal peak for snowpack. The runoff happened pretty quick. You can see that we get out here to May and wow, it really dropped off. And so it kind of ran out pretty early. And this year we're at 83% of the seasonal peak. But the thing is, that just gives us some of the data. What's interesting about that is the last 2 years, we've seen some kind of crazy anomaly in the runoff. And this is what Blue Mesa would normally look at this time of the year. This is what it looked like in 2002, at the beginning of the runoff. It's going to look something like that at the end of this year. And Todd, let's talk about that runoff prediction. So based on the snowpack, and then the Colorado Basin River Forecast Center runs these runoff forecast models that also factor in things like precipitation, the soil moisture conditions. And last year we saw it was a pretty good snowpack year, but there was only 387,000 acre feet of runoff, which was something like 58% of normal. So things just didn't seem like they were adding up. And again, this year, the models are predicting about a 46% average runoff. I just pulled this chart yesterday. So now the Colorado Basin River Forecast Center is only predicting 310,000 acre feet of runoff into Blue Mesa, April through July runoff. And that's only 46% of average. Average would be about 675,000 just into Blue Mesa alone. Now there's Morrow and Crystal just downstream from that also play into this. And so what does that mean? Well, this chart here is, I will say that the operations and management of the storage in Blue Mesa Reservoir are dominated by maintaining certain flow regime in the lower Gunnison. And based on the hydraulic type of year, is it a dry year, a moderately dry year, and so on in this left-hand column, that's based on a May 1st runoff forecast by the Colorado Basin River Forecast Center. That May 1st forecast was 381. It's been adjusted all the way down now to 310. But that gives the parameters by which the Bureau of Reclamation is going to make releases out of the reservoir to meet certain flow conditions in the lower Gunnison, actually as measured at the river gauge at Whitewater on the lower Gunnison. And so this year, because it's so dry and because the reservoir is so low, there will be no peaks to be generated, and the reservoir it's actually intended to need to recover. So for example, in 2019, we had a moderately wet year and there was a very large peak met, and it was sustained at half that measure for 40 days. And so that was quite a lot of water that was released in 2019, but for the last 2 years, it's been really dry, and there's some reasons for that. And so let's look at this next slide and show you what does this year look like compared to the last 50 years that Blue Mesa has stored each year. And it's way down. That this is the May 1st runoff forecast was readjusted down to 340,000. It's actually going to run into about 310,000. So it's thinking about like one of the 4th worst runoff years on record. Last year was 387,000 acre feet. So we've had 2 really bad years in a row. And the reason for that is no summer monsoons. We've had very little summer rain. It's been very dry. In fact, 2019, we had a big snowpack year, but that was also a very dry summer. So, and truly you can see what this chart is. It's the river gauge at Whitewater near Grand Junction. There's 112 years of data. And this golden colored line is the mean flow over time. And this is a logarithmic chart. So I picked a 90-day period. So I've got March into June up until just recent. And you can see that the river was peaking. But nowhere on this blue line, which is the actual hydrograph for this year, has it ever gotten above the mean. And the target flow that they're trying to maintain right now is 890 CFS. So they dipped below it. We had a very cold period in the second week of April, and we lost a lot of natural stream flow. And so you can see that, yeah, we're struggling this year. It's not good. And so that's what it looks like in the upper Gunnison Basin with respect to our base flows. They're low, reservoir levels are low, and the snowpack, while it started off looking pretty good, the runoff is very poor because of the very, very dry soil conditions. Okay, now we're going to move on to the Uncompahgre. And this is what Ridgeway Reservoir is looking like. It's at one of the lowest points ever at the beginning of a fill season. I think it is the lowest point that's ever been since it filled during a fill season. So this is a far cry from what we would normally expect at this time of the year. And again, the snowtail charts actually don't look too bad. I mean, last year, you know, it was 92% of the seasonal peak. This year, 88% up in the high country. You know, what could be wrong? Well, again, it's that the very, very dry soil conditions where the Colorado Basin River Forecast Center models are only predicting 48% of average runoff. See, they're expecting about 56,000 acre feet. This ESP model, that's called their ensemble stream flow prediction of 56,000 acre feet. Well, the reservoir itself is 84,000, so this wouldn't even fill the reservoir. Normal runoff is about 101,000 acre feet. So in any average year, you would expect Ridgeway Reservoir to fill, and then they would have to spill water, or at least they run it through their power generation units. But this year, it's very tight, very, very tight. And I don't think those models are underestimating the predicted runoff. In fact, historically, they actually have overestimated. But right now, they're dialing it in pretty well with factoring in these low soil moisture conditions. And as far as this is the river gauge on the Uncompahgre River at Ridgeway, right above the reservoir. And you can see that there's 62 years of data here. The peak flow is bumped up above the average a couple of times. We had this warm trend in March, right at the beginning of April, and where it bumped up, but then dropped back down, has been pretty much below the normal mean right up until just this last weekend. Got very, very hot, and that high country snow has melted, but we've seen the peak, I'm convinced. The peak was at over close to, I think, 1,200 Saturday, and now it's run quite a bit back down. What does this mean for the water users? Well, the dominant water user is the Uncompahgre Valley Water Users Association. I mean, this is really what all the action is about. I mean, Blue Mesa Reservoir and the Gunnison River are dominated also by use from the Uncompahgre Valley Water Users. And this is the Uray County, Montrose County line at the bottom of the screen. And again, the river flows, of course, from south to north. These purple lines are a series of canals that the water is diverted again and again out of the Uncompahgre River. That water is delivered to over 80,000 acres of irrigated land in the valley all the way to Delta. You can see over here where the Gunnison Tunnel diverts out of the Black Canyon and drops that into what's called the South Canal. And that adds water. We keep a track of that water. And so we have what we call various colors of water in the Uncompahgre. But the big dog in, excuse me, I thought I had thought I had something that was going to whirl in here and point to the M&D Canal. The Montrose and Delta Canal is, I would consider that the dominant calling structure on the Uncompahgre River. And so the Uncompahgre River has multiple water rights in Uray County. There's hundreds of water rights that are diverting in Uray County. And many of those are junior to some of the very senior water rights in the Montrose and Delta Canal, in the M&D Canal. And in a year like this, we already had an early call in April. Then the runoff happened, and the runoff is occurring right now, and the call in the river is off. So the reservoir can store, Ridgeway Reservoir, which is just off the screen, and water users and irrigators in Uray County are now back on. But what I expect, as soon as that, early this summer, I would imagine maybe early as mid-July, I expect probably pressure from the Uncompahgre Valley water users to put another call on the river so that they use less of their storage water in Ridgeway Reservoir. The more natural flow water they can get out of the Uncompahgre River by calling for water administration for their water rights, the less they would have to rely on their storage water. Okay, and so here's what we've seen so far. Moving on to the North Fork River, excuse me. So moving on to the North Fork River, what we've seen as we move west, north and west, is that the water supply continues to drop off. This forecast is the worst in our area of the division, and it peaked around the same time as the Uncompahgre at about 1,200 CFS. And I'm using the gauge at Somerset on the North Fork. So Somerset is upstream from Peonia. It's also upstream from the first, big stream diversion, which is the Fire Mountain Canal. But it's below the confluence of the Anthracite Creek and what comes out of Peonia Reservoir. So above Peonia Reservoir is all of Muddy Creek. And I'm going to show a diagram of that here in a minute. And so now that all you experts are at reading these charts, you can see that this is the gauge at Somerset since earlier in March up until just recently. And nowhere has the flow in the North Fork ever gone above the mean. This is an 87-year mean, this gold line. So yeah, it's pretty poor, and I expect that the storage water in Peonia Reservoir, which I'll go on to the next chart. I got a very busy graphic coming up ahead here. Let me explain this. We call it the Peony Project. Peony Project is consists of the Peonia Reservoir, which opened in 1962, and the Fire Mountain Canal, which is this purple line. It diverts just upstream of Somerset. Just downstream of Somerset where the river gauge is. It irrigates up to about 15,000 acres of land. Now, what some of you might not understand is that the North Fork River is actually dried up in 3 different spots, namely the Stewart Ditch, the Peonia Ditch, and here's the town of Peonia, and then the Short Ditch, which is above Hotchkiss. Once you get below the Short Ditch, and where LaRue Creek dumps in, return flows start filling the North Fork back up. So there's live water once you hit the confluence with the Black Canyon of the Gunnison down below Hotchkiss. Now there are a lot of players in here. I hope I don't leave everybody out, but the North Fork Water Conservancy District is in charge of operations at Peonia Reservoir, and then the Fire Mountain Canal Company is running and operating the Fire Mountain Canal. Now there's the LaRue Creek Water Users Association is also involved here, because when the project went in, some of this land on Rogers Mesa that was irrigated by water rights out of LaRue Creek was now receiving water from the Fire Mountain Canal Company. And then the rest of that water was exchanged back up LaRue Creek, and so that more land could be irrigated on Redlands Mesa. And so there's also some additional water brought in from Overland Reservoir. Well, the Overland Reservoir is about 9,000 acre feet. It's a pretty senior reservoir, a very senior canal, 1914. And that canal sweeps across the bottom of the mesa here, picking up water from multiple tributaries, delivers that down into LaRue Creek, and some of that water is then taken out again over in Redlands Mesa as well. So a pretty complicated system. There's work and projects, being cooked up to try to keep more water in the river for fish and environmental purposes. So I know that was a super busy slide, but I just wanted to let you know that this is it is the most over appropriated area in Water Division 4. Every drop of water is spoken for, and it takes a lot of people to run all this. So finally, I got to bring up Grand Mesa and the system of reservoirs up there. This water is very important for growing. There's thousands of acres of cherries and peaches and apples and vineyards, as well as there's domestic and municipal water systems that rely on this water. The main stream systems are George Creek, Ward, Kaiser, Young, and Surface Creek over here to the right. And you can see what I've done is these percentages. These percentages, as I'm showing, are how much water the reservoirs have stored this year. The worst is clear over here to the west. There's a bunch of city-owned, the city of Delta owns a number of reservoirs just off the screen here. They've only filled to 34% and they're done. Now, up here in the Granbys, they filled to 42%. Ward and Kaiser Creek, about 51%. Youngs Creek reservoirs, these in blue, 59%. And then the Surface Creek reservoirs have only filled to 66%. The fill season's over, they're done. Now they're starting to deliver storage water already. And all that water goes down to all these orchards and vineyards and irrigated lands down above Cedar Edge and below. So looking ahead, this is the latest U.S. drought monitor. You can see the chart a week before this. Actually, I should have showed the chart that was a week ahead of this. It showed much of the eastern plains in colored yellow and abnormally dry. Now they're pretty much white. The state is half of the state is not in drought. That's what you can look up to this chart. Half of it is in the white, 51%. But we're over here in all this red and dark red in extreme and exceptional drought. And certainly what we're hoping for is that, this season that we'll move into a good monsoon season. But what I'm seeing from the forecast data is that the chart on the left, this is a temperature chart that we're going to see above average temperatures here in the west, centered that persistent high pressure zone that parks itself over the four corners is showing up again. And then if you look at the chart on the right, the 30-day outlook is for, it looks like more or less below average precipitation. But these are models, these are charts. We're hoping to see that the mold will get broken here, and we'll see some storms move into our area, with moisture coming up out of Mexico. So that's pretty much it. I think I nailed it right about 25 minutes, and I can leave time for questions now, or we can stuff them in at the end. That's up to you.
I think we're going to do questions at the end for
okay, perfect.
So, but thank you. That was a fantastic presentation, certainly sobering. We've got a lot of work to do on the Western Slope to get through this year, that's for sure.
Yes, sir, we do.
Well, our next presenter is a colleague and a friend at the River District, Deputy Chief Engineer, and recently named the River District's Director of Science and Interstate Matters, Dave Kanzer. Most of you may know him as DK. He is no stranger to the Gunnison River Valley, having managed the Lower Gunnison Project for many years and having worked with countless water users and communities throughout the Gunnison Basin during his more than 20 years at the River District. So with that, a man who honestly needs no real introduction in the Gunnison Basin, I'll turn it over to DK, and he's going to give us an overview of the Lower Gunnison Project. Thanks,
Wow.
DK.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And thank you, Bob, for that sobering news. And actually, it's a really good sort of introduction or preview to what I want to talk about, the Lower Gunnison Project and why it's important and why you should care. And if I can get this baby to work, I'm going to talk about the Lower Gunnison Project, or the LGP. It's something I've been working on for a long time, and many of you have heard me talk about it. So you can zone out a little bit at the beginning here, because this slide pretty much tells it all. Okay, this one slide, it's the wordiest slide I have. It describes the Lower Gunnison Project, its needs and its actions, and why we put it together at the Colorado River District with a whole host, a list of partners that is between 30 and 40 entities long. But essentially, you know, the Lower Gunnison, as Bob talked about, it's got a very diverse and interesting sort of history and geology. And what this project is trying to do, all in one fell swoop, is to address these things that you can see here: water quality, water availability, habitat, soil health, and of course, aging infrastructure. We've got a whole lot of that in the Gunnison and really across the West Slope, right? And we do this through a series of integrated water use efficiency projects. So what does that mean? We're improving these systems by piping earthen unlined ditches, putting those in a pressurized pipe, laterals as well, putting in sprinklers that can take advantage of pressure that's developed in these pipelines, putting in regulation facilities in line to capture what might otherwise be spilled and lost, and of course, putting in technology to help us manage all this. And so what this does and has been doing is increasing productivity for agricultural users by becoming more efficient, introducing some important sustainability practices. You know, a lot of these I refer to, and others refer to, as best management practices, right? BMPs. So you may hear that. And really what those BMPs are just what I said: the piping, the sprinklers, the storage, and technology. That's the story and the pictures I want to tell here, or use the pictures to tell the story. And it really does a whole lot environmentally, agriculturally, and it gives us a tool to really manage our supplies in a way that we haven't had so much in the Lower Gunnison until now. There's still a lot to do. You'll hear that, but we're nearing a milestone, so to speak. Some of our funding is running out this year. We had about $8 million. We combined that with some other federal dollars, and we're spending about $25 to $30 million in these 4 focus areas that you can see on the map here. And these areas are here, and you can see this little, I always like to point this out. To me, it looks like the heartbeat of the entire upper Colorado River Basin. What we do in this area of the Lower Gunnison affects millions of people downstream for both quality and quantity and habitat. So these 4 areas: the Uncompahgre Valley, Bostwick Park Water Conservancy District, the Smith Fork or Crawford Country, and the North Fork, okay? And across these areas, we're doing a whole bunch of stuff that I just mentioned. And if you haven't been to this country, it's a wild place, right? It's really rugged, and it's stunning and diverse. And so scenes like this can typify the vistas that you see, but what you also see is pretty rudimentary irrigation, right? And if you go to other parts of the basin, and this is where I switch from words to just a lot of pictures of what we see in the basin and really what we want to see. This is before we're improving, pretty, again, rugged, difficult to irrigate country that is manually intensive and takes a whole lot of time and effort to get out there and manually put in things like these cloth dams that you can see here or may know about. And obviously you can lose water to the groundwater, getting past the root zone and causing things like we call deep percolation, which is really the enemy of almost every irrigator. You want that water to go to the root zone where it can do its most good. And we do that through, as I said, implementation of best management practices. Gated pipe, huge step forward, right? That goes from, increases water use efficiency to 20 to 30% of the diverted water being used. When you move to sprinklers, and this is really what we're pushing for, at least in the lower valleys. This doesn't necessarily work in all of the upper valleys where return flows and other issues predominate. But again, in the lower Gunnison, these devices, these tools, along with technology, can really be game changers. And moving up from inefficiencies of that 30%, and now with this kind of system, upwards of 80% irrigation efficiency. Obviously very critical and increasing productivity, whether you're growing hemp in this example, sweet corn, forage, you name it. It's an amazing way to increase production and decrease your input costs, decrease labor, of course. And as I said, it's really an important thing to improve our technology and our understanding of water use. And through the Lower Gunnison Project, we have collected, on-farm data, real-time evapotranspiration data. In other words, how much water do these crops need and how much is going into the soil? And when you have good soil moisture, which we don't have this year, you can increase your water efficiency and decrease your application rates, right? So that's what we're after. And that's what we're being able to do here. And I think I just hit the wrong button. Let's see. Try again here, excuse me. All right. So, what this also does for us and our producers, our really important producers throughout the basin, these pictures are actually the Grand Valley, but it's the same issue in the Lower Gunnison, where soil health is a critically important resource. Loss of soil erosion. We're really trying to improve the soils by changing practices. And this can be done through minimum till or even no till. And this gentleman here is sort of turning back the clock and going back to practices that really yield a lot of good things for the environment and also productivity by minimizing tills, the number of passes that he needs to take, and changing his irrigation practices to suit, right? That's part of the equation. That's the on-farm piece. What about the getting the water to the fields? Well, it takes, and the Lower Gunnison Project's been pushing this, along with others, to put miles and miles of pipe into the ground. That reduces the loss of deep percolation and seepage. And so we have dispatched trucks and trucks moving pipe throughout the Lower Gunnison of different types and varieties to convey water efficiently from the source to the point of use. So it doesn't take a rocket scientist to let you know that that gives you much better control. And we've done this, as I said, in these 4 focus areas. We're continuing to do this. The Fire Mountain Canal, you just heard Bob talk about this, very important segment. We put in about 5 together with Reclamation and our other partners, NRCS, put in about 4 or 5 miles of pipeline. And that pipeline is not just a simple stick of plastic pipe, right? All sorts of fittings, meters, structures to allow us to better control that water. Same thing in Bostwick Park. As I'm flying through the basin, you get the picture, right? We're putting things into the ground and making it more efficient and minimizing our loss. But at the same time, we're able to put in structures that are more environmentally friendly. And a shout out to Kerry Dennison, who looks like is on the call here. He worked with us in Trout Unlimited to put in this fish-friendly structure. If you can see this, what allows fish to bypass what used to be a hard stop. Now the fish can get up through the structure and get to spawning habitat or other areas, you know, refugia and other important parts of the Smith Fork. This is on the Smith Fork above Crawford, right? So as we keep moving forward here, a few more projects I want to highlight. You know, I mentioned inline storage. It's really tough to manage water supplies when you're constantly melting and freezing during the night, especially in the springtime. So, you know, a big diurnal shift or movement and swings can cause you to be inefficient and lose water. These irrigation companies really can benefit from inline storage. They're off channel, they're environmentally friendly when done correctly. And we through this Lower Gunnison project, we're able to put in this one for the Crawford Clipper Ditch Company, or help them put it in, I should say. So technology, a critical piece. What does that mean? It means remote monitoring, control, using meters, sensors, actuators, and communications. And you can see that in this slide. And as I quickly run out of time, I just want to show you some pictures of sort of after the fact, right? We're making progress. We're making big strides, and you're going to hear about the victory that we were part of, a small part of a big cooperative effort. So what's next is more of the same, okay? We're going to continue doing these things. We're going to use a portfolio of funding and continue to put technology and pipe in the ground for all of us and our constituents. So thanks for your time, and stay tuned for more good news from the rest of the team here tonight.
Awesome. Thank you so much, DK, for that awesome presentation and overview of the Lower Gunnison project, and for all your incredible work on this project and in the Gunnison River Basin as a whole. It's obviously made a huge impact, as we could see from those photos, and as we'll hear shortly from our other team. So thanks so much, DK. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
So our next presentation is going to discuss what DK has alluded to, this good news for the Gunnison River Basin as a result of the Lower Gunnison project. So it's going to be a discussion with another Colorado River District staffer, Raquel Flinker, and she'll be speaking today with Ken Leib, who is the acting director of the Colorado Water Science Center at USGS. About an incredible landmark accomplishment for the Gunnison River Basin and its selenium levels, which is going to be an exciting talk. So I'll introduce Raquel first, and she'll be introducing Ken, but Raquel recently joined the Colorado River District technical team as a senior water resources engineer and program manager. Raquel is a registered professional engineer in water resources with her most recent experience at the city of Aspen, and is using her skills and background to provide technical advocacy and support to West Slope water users with a focus on the Gunnison River Basin. Welcome, Raquel and Ken. We're so excited to hear this news from you guys, and Raquel, I'll pass it off to you.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'm so glad to be with you guys tonight, and thank you for the intro, Marielle. As Marielle mentioned, I'm Raquel Flinker, and today I want to talk to you about a recent victory for the Lower Gunnison. 66 miles of the Gunnison River between the city of Delta and Grand Junction is being delisted from the impaired waters list for selenium. This is a very important milestone and definitely a reason to celebrate. And it is the result of years of work by multiple organizations, the NRCS, the Bureau, the River District, USGS, CWCB, several Conservancy districts and water users, from some of the largest users to small landowners. And actually, you just heard a great presentation from Dave Kanzer. He has been leading many of these efforts for over 2 decades. Next slide, please. The delisting is happening because the Gunnison River is meeting the state of Colorado standards. This graph shows selenium concentrations in parts per billion through time at the Gunnison River near Grand Junction. There has been a decrease in selenium concentrations, and since 2018, levels have been below the state of Colorado standard for aquatic life of 4.6 parts per billion, and that is shown in red as the red line on the graph. Next, please. But what is selenium? It is a chemical element. You can see it here in the periodic table circled in red. And selenium is an essential micronutrient in small quantities. You can even find it in health supplements, but it is toxic in bigger amounts. And its toxic effects can result in the mortality, decreased reproduction, and deformities in offspring of egg-laying species, such as fish and birds. And this is of particular concern to the recovery of endangered fish in the region, primarily the Colorado pike minnow and the razorback sucker, and you can see images of those fish in the slide. Additionally, selenium accumulates through the aquatic food chain. So for example, as fish grow and eat more and more food containing selenium, they accumulate it in their bodies. Also, species higher in the food chain accumulate selenium as they feed on multiple living things that contain it. Selenium is found in our soils in geologic layers, more specifically the Mancos Shale, and that originated from ancient oceans. The Mancos Shale is shown here in this image, and you can see this landscape dominating when you drive through the western slope and further west. Next. It is present in the lower Gunnison as seen on this map. The red depicts the areas with the highest selenium yield. The critical region is along the Uncompahgre River between Montrose and Delta, and the east of the Uncompahgre River is where the selenium yields are the highest. But how does selenium actually end up in our creeks and rivers? In this diagram, water from an unlined ditch is being used inefficiently. And this can be an irrigated field, someone's backyard, or any other water use. The water from the ditch and from the inefficient water use seeps into the soil and picks up selenium present in these soils. Next slide, please. The higher this higher selenium water ends up flowing into the creeks and rivers. And I wanted to point out that selenium is present in soils in other parts of Western US, but it is a particular problem in the lower Gunnison due to the inefficient use of water, which can mobilize and transport the selenium into the rivers, especially because of deep percolation. And DK mentioned this in his earlier presentation. Deep percolation happens when too much water is applied and infiltrates beyond the root zone. With changes in water and land uses over the years, selenium levels in our rivers were increasing, but this trend has been reversed. And to help us better understand this, I would like to invite Ken Leib with the USGS. Ken is the acting director of the Colorado Water Science Center. Welcome, Ken.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
We're very happy to have you. Ken has been involved with selenium efforts in the Gunnison River Basin for 20 years and has been a leader in these efforts. He has helped collect evidence and geochemical data on how and why selenium mobilizes and is transported. We definitely could not have gotten here without him and the USGS. So Ken, how did we achieve this important milestone? Why are the levels of selenium in the river lower than they were 2 decades ago?
Well, DK and yourself, you guys just gave a great overview of how it can happen. I'll echo that. A lot of the credit goes to local water users, specifically the agricultural community. There's just been a lot of effort put towards increasing efficiency of irrigation delivery systems and on-farm irrigation systems in the Uncompahgre, the Grand Valley, the North Fork areas, all over the lower Gunnison. Some of this has been achieved through private endeavors, and some has resulted from participation in various state and federal programs like those at the NRCS. reclamation, and of course the river district. But as a result of the improved irrigation efficiency projects, less selenium and salinity are leached out of the soils to the river. It's as simple as that. Oftentimes, less water or flow in the river, as we've seen in previous presentations today, means higher concentrations of selenium, for example. There's just less dilution. Despite drought conditions and lower flows that we've had over the past few decades, we're not seeing that. So we're really confident that the decreases in selenium that we're observing are real and have resulted from improvements in system efficiencies. It's really quite impressive, and folks should be proud of what they've accomplished.
Thank you very much for that. Could you talk a little bit about an example of a project and what it accomplished, how much loading of selenium it avoided? It would be really interesting to hear about one of those.
The one that really set things off in the Untitled Basin and informed us of how well system improvements can affect selenium levels and salinity levels was some work done in Montrose Arroyo. They abandoned a lot of open irrigation ditch and put it in the pipe, and we really almost immediately saw decreases in salinity load concentration as well as selenium load and concentration. And so that right there, that pilot project was proof that, depending on the area you're working in, you can really have some substantial improvements. And it was on the order of, I think, 28% for salinity as a decrease, somewhere around there for salinity. So yeah, that was a good project.
Wow, that is impressive. And we talked a little bit about how these impact egg-laying species, and how can these projects positively impact water users?
Yeah, it's not just about decreasing selenium. I mean, that's a great side effect, but one of the main positive impacts for water users is the potential for drought resistance or drought tolerance. Increased efficiency can lead to increases in productivity as well as decreases in water consumption. This in turn enables users to draw less water from storage facilities or just pull less water from the river. So the idea would be that more water is left in storage for subsequent years, and if done properly, both storage and productivity can increase. And that helps users get through some of these lean and dry years that have been fairly persistent over the last few decades.
Very nice. And this has been a very important milestone for the Lower Gunnison, but there's still a lot of work to be done. And what work and why does work need to continue?
Well, there's a few things going on. Of course, there's always more work to be done. We do want to be good stewards. One thing worth mentioning is that the delisting of the Gunnison River for selenium is one step on the road to recovery of native fish. These fish are still not able to reproduce and sustain naturally in the Gunnison. So the ultimate goal of fish recovery has yet to be achieved, but we're definitely moving in the right direction. Additionally, development on previously unirrigated lands on adobe shales can quickly offset the gains seen to water quality in the Gunnison. We have seen this in the past at Devil's Thumb Golf Course in Delta and even another golf course in Montrose. Both areas have been mitigated successfully and are no longer issues for the basin, but these types of issues are still occurring, mostly on a smaller scale through residential development or smaller hobby farms and the like. And this problem is very manageable. Just needs to be an educational component that helps people understand the role of irrigation efficiency at that scale and how important it is.
Wow, so basically all of the work that that has been accomplished throughout these 20 years plus could be easily reversed if we don't take care and use best management practices.
Yeah, I think some of the data indicates that the potential is there for that.
That's great. I think, Zane, are we running out of time? I see you popped up over here.
we're a couple minutes over, but I think it's probably time to move on to the next one. But I do appreciate that overview, Raquel and Ken. I think it ties in very well to the presentation that DK gave. Really appreciate the work that you've done on this, Ken, and the work that you're doing on it, Raquel, as well.
Thank you.
As I said, it is easy to see how all of this is tied together. I think back to that slide that DK showed, where really the Gunnison Basin is kind of the heartbeat of the lower or of the upper basin as a whole, and what happens here and how we deal with water quality certainly affects water users throughout the basin. But really appreciate those overviews and those presentations. So I'm pleased to introduce our next speaker this evening, who's going to speak to an issue that is near and dear to my heart, and I'm sure to most of us on this webinar this evening. A native Coloradan, David Dragoo, is the founder of Mayfly Outdoors, an outdoor products company and certified B Corporation, proudly based in Montrose, Colorado. David also leads the Colorado Outdoors Project in Montrose, which is a public-private partnership aimed at community revitalization and restoring the Uncompahgre River corridor in Montrose. I hope that I did justice to that, David. Thanks for being with us, and look forward to seeing your presentation.
Yeah, thanks, Zane. I appreciate the intro. This is a topic near and dear to my heart, and to many on this call. And I think this topic, the recreation economy and its impacts, is a pretty complicated topic. However, I think for why this matters for folks on the call is that many of you are water experts, water leaders, and I think this data will surprise you, but also give you some greater insights on why your work is important beyond the property rights and the land use principles that we all value and the conservation principles that we value. And I think ultimately, your advocacy is key. And I think your knowledge in this segment will allow you to tell a greater story in that outdoor rec is one of the most important and significant components, not only of our local economy, but in Colorado in general. And so what I'm going to do tonight, I'm going to walk you through sort of some national statistics. We're going to get into some state statistics and then really focus in on the lower Gunnison. And I think before we do that, I'm going to give the folks who aren't familiar with us just a quick intro on who we are at Mayfly and our brands. If you're not a fly fisherman or woman or an angler, these are our brands at the bottom: Able, Ross Reels, and Airflow. As Zane said, we're headquartered in Montrose. We have about 120 employees now, and about 60 are in Colorado. And we've been there for many years and very happy and proud to be there. And, again, I think at the end, we'll have some time for some Q&A if folks have some questions about the video, about the statistics. And then, Eleanor, I think I'm going to turn it over to you to play a short video.
Not getting any sound on this one. It might be worth trying to start over and see if we can't get some sound on what looks to be an awesome video.
And if we can't get it to play, we can move on, Zane. That's okay.
Yeah, no worries.
It's not a rah-rah video, so it was going to get folks excited, but that's okay.
And we can share a link to the YouTube link in the chat function as well.
Sure.
I was looking forward to seeing it though, so maybe we can get that link in the chat function
Sure.
because I'd love to watch it a little later as well. So
Sure, be great. All right, so we'll try to move on here, see if we can get this back going. Eleanor, I'm not sure if maybe you can drive. Maybe we can just get you to control it, and then we can probably get through it a little quicker.
Hey, Alicia, I think the screen share is paused.
There we go. It's working now. I think Eleanor got it. Thank you. So this this first slide it's kind of an interesting one. I think when we talk about outdoor recreation, I think some of these stats really shock some people. They surprise them, to say the least. And on a national level, about 2 years ago, the outdoor recreation economy is now counted as part of our GDP. It's so big that economists said, we got to start counting this. And on your screen, this just gives you one data point on annual consumer spending for outdoor rec. And it surprises most people when I tell them that spending in this sector outpaces what we spend on pharmaceuticals and gasoline and utilities combined. A lot of people don't believe me, but I say, check with the economists, the Bureau of Labor Statistics and all their wisdom. And I think what's important is to contextualize what this data means. And outdoor recreation spending means not only travel and leisure associated with it, but gear spending. So the products that we make comprise about 20 to 25% of that number in orange, and then the rest of it is travel. Next slide, please, Eleanor. And so when we talk about the Colorado River, what's really interesting is to look at it as if it were, an actual business. And what does this actually mean as far as its size? And so we could put these statistics together to give you an idea about the Colorado River and sort of its size. If it were a company, it would shock most people that it's the 155th largest business in the world, Fortune 500 company, if you count it as its own industry. It's larger than American Airlines, Progressive Insurance, and many others. And its employment and its sales will shock you. And these are all things related to sales on or around the Colorado River. So the employment statistics on your screen, Eleanor, go ahead and click. It'd be the 19th largest business in the United States if the Colorado River were an actual business. And its retail sales are even more humongous, about 17 billion in retail sales annually from just the Colorado River. And next slide. So as we kind of funnel it down into the Gunnison River and the Gunnison River Basin, we can count some of these statistics too. And so annual spending just in the Gunnison River Basin on water-related activity is just about 900 million a year. It's actually the fourth in the state. So we're behind the Arkansas River Basin, the Colorado River Basin, and then downtown Denver. Its employment's pretty substantial too. We can count the number of jobs that are related to it, almost 6,200 jobs. And our participation's pretty substantial too. This includes people who participate in water or water-related activities from outside the state and from in the states. And it's about 1 million people a year. So on average, we can sort of extrapolate that the average spender is about $900 a year on average for water and water-related activity in the Gunnison River Basin. Next slide, please. And so our expertise, of course, is fishing, fly fishing in particular, and we can actually measure what our impact is in our industry in just the Gunnison River Basin. So I thought these would be interesting for some of you statistic nerds, out there on the call. So we contribute pretty significantly to our state's GDP, and these are all state-specific figures, but it's about $30 million a year on average. It's actually increasing with COVID. These are 2018 statistics. Our employment, which includes our company, is just over 400 jobs. And if you add up all the wages that we pay every year, and we say, well, what do we contribute to the state's economy? It's about $20 million. And so, interestingly enough, I think what these show is sort of the rest of the story. It says, what do all this, what does this all mean? And I think its economic impact is so substantial that it, as I said, it surprises most people. And I think that's some context to give you guys on why what you do is important, and that it's a significant contributor on a local level, on a state level, and really a national level to our economy. And so I think with that, I think we'll have some extra time at the end for questions, and I'll turn it back over to Marielle to hear from Amy.
Thank you so much, David. What a great perspective to hear, especially as a recreationalist myself and a fly fisher. It's really a fascinating lens to kind of look at the impacts and the broader community. So it was great. Thank you so much. I'll look forward to watching that video through the chat link as well. So last in our webinar this evening, but certainly not least, is our colleague Amy Moyer, who has some exciting information on new funding and project opportunities in the Gunnison River Basin. Amy serves as the Director of Strategic Partnerships for the Colorado River District and oversees the district's new community funding program, which was created following the passage of Ballot Measure 7A last November by voters within the district's boundaries. Amy has been with the district since March of 2021. Welcome, Amy, and thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you so much, Marielle. Good evening, everyone. Again, my name is Amy Moyer, and I am the Director of Strategic Partnerships with the Colorado River District. And I am looking forward to spending a few minutes of your time tonight to talk about the River District's new community funding partnership, our new funding program at the River District. And for those of you who've been following our funding program closely, you'll notice some updated branding from us. So previously called the Partnership Project Funding Program, we have rebranded to the Community Funding Partnership. And the reason for that is we want to emphasize the importance of being a part of our communities. We want to be a partner on your projects, and we want to work through the challenges that we heard from Bob's presentation to lead to the victories that we heard from during our earlier presentations. There we go. But I'll start with some program history. So many of you know that our funding program started at the ballot box with the passage of ballot question 7A in November of 2020. And we've said this before, and we'll continue to say thank you so much to our Colorado voters, our West Slope voters, for supporting this initiative, for supporting water, and in particularly water on the West Slope. But as I mentioned, the goal of this program is to advance the Colorado River District mission and strategic plan to protect our water on the West Slope, to use it wisely, and ultimately to help all of our communities adapt to a drier future. And with the passage of ballot question 7A, we have about $4.2 million annually to invest in high impact projects. We have currently funded 8 projects so far. Again, this is our first year of this revamped funding program. You can see the 8 projects in the project map on this slide, and you can also find the project map on our website with brief descriptions of each of our projects. But in the 8 projects include a variety of project types, from dam rehabilitation to ditch piping and diversion structure upgrades to integrated water supply management plans or post-fire water quality monitoring. And what this means on the ground is that we're opening up new storage on the West Slope. We are helping our communities understand and work through the realities of post-fire recovery, and we're making our delivery systems more efficient. And so in the Gunnison Basin in particular, we're proud to support 2 projects so far, with the first being upgrading Fish Creek Reservoir number 2. And so this project will repair the outlet works at the reservoir, which will lift the storage restriction and open up some additional high mountain storage in the basin to support late season irrigation. But I also want to emphasize that Trout Unlimited is also a partner in this project and is working on a conservation plan to look at how these releases in the reservoir can restore a once productive fishery, open up recreation opportunities in the Gunnison Basin. On the Upper Gunnison, we funded a diversion project that will combine 2 irrigation ditches or 2 irrigation diversion structures into one single and improved point of diversion that will enable the water users on those diversion structures, on those ditches, to divert water during both high and low flows, because we know that our climate is obviously variable. We've seen all of the diagrams for Bob's presentation and how important that will be going into the future. But as part of this, it will eliminate the need to disturb the river, bring in high impact, heavy equipment into the river, which will in turn restore a section of the Upper Gunnison River into a more naturally functioning stream. So overall, again, these are multi-purpose, multi-benefit projects. They are leveraging additional dollars. They have multiple partners. And again, we're thrilled to be a financial partner in these projects and to see these projects move towards construction later this year. But hitting some of our program basics in terms of eligibility, projects are eligible within the River District 15 county region. And we also have a wide variety of project proponents that are eligible for our funding program that are listed on this slide. We're looking to strategically provide investments, both large and small. So our small ditch companies, to our towns, to our conservancy districts, that are collaborative projects with local support. And so as part of our program, we do require a letter of support from the relevant Board of County Commissioners for each project. And that's a unique requirement from our program versus other funding programs. And the reason for that is it's important to us to work in conjunction with our local elected officials, keep them aware of our water challenges, and work in tandem as we work towards solutions. We want this funding program to be a catalyst to leverage additional funding. So we don't have a set match requirement, which again is unique for a funding program. The importance of that is we want to meet our projects where we at. We know we have unique communities here in our district. We have unique projects, but it's important to emphasize that the River District will never be the sole source of funding for any project. And we do expect the project proponent to bring some cash to the table. And so again, it's our intent to leverage these funds, identify other funding partners, whether that's state, local, private, philanthropic, federal dollars. It's our intention to use these public funds wisely and in a way that multiplies their impact. We are funding projects across 5 project categories. So productive agriculture, healthy rivers, watershed health and water quality, conservation and efficiency, and infrastructure. And I know we only have a few minutes here and we want to get to a Q&A with our wonderful panelists. So I want to pause and make a plug. You can find more information on the Colorado River District website. We have a webinar that was dedicated solely to this funding program where we walk through potential examples that might fit within these project categories. But I want to emphasize again, we're seeking multiple benefit projects that are most competitive, can explain how the project objectives can span multiple of these categories. And I also want to say that we can support projects in multiple phases. So the River District's funding program, our community funding partnership, can support planning, design, construction for projects. But at this point, we are not reimbursing for completed projects. And the reason for that is we want to be a partner in our community projects early on. We want to be a part of its formation, help as much as we can and as early as we can. Our funding program also has important equity principles built throughout, and it's equity to disperse our funds geographically across our 15 county district and also equitably across categories. So we want to support our ranchers and farmers in the Uncompahgre Valley. We want to support our fruit growers up on Rogers Mesa. We want to support our world-class recreation towns and folks that want to come run our rivers and fish our rivers. So we are tracking projects by county, by category, by basin to keep us honest and move towards those equity principles that we're tracking and hope to achieve on a 5-year rolling average basis. In terms of our application process, we first recommend a pre-application meeting with us. So during that time, we can walk through our application process, we can answer any questions, and we can learn more about your project needs. So we can suggest additional partners that you might reach out to. We can recommend ideas, again, to make your project multi-benefit, multi-purpose, and ultimately more competitive for our funding. We can recommend other funding opportunities and provide any guidance that we might have on things like navigating the permitting process or getting through other project milestones. We are also accepting applications on a rolling application basis. And again, this makes our program stand out. And the intention behind that is projects operate on different timelines, and
We also want to align with other grant opportunities that may have only 1 or 2 grant cycles a year, because again, the intention is that we're leveraging these dollars, we're matching them with other funding programs. We do have 2 approval pathways for our funding requests. So funding requests under $50,000 can typically be reviewed by the River District General Manager, and larger projects over $50,000 will go before the Colorado River District Board for ultimate approval that meets quarterly in January, April, July, and October. So just to wrap up, what to do next. If you're interested in learning more, you have a project that is looking for funding and aligns with the Colorado River District mission, the first thing to do is, again, go to our website, coloradoriverdistrict.org. You can find a specific webpage for the Community Funding Partnership. Go ahead and review the program materials. We have guidance documents, as well as the application materials linked. And then contact us for that pre-application meeting. So you can do that by emailing either myself, Amy Moyer, or partnerfunding@crwcd.org to set up that conversation. And then ultimately you will submit an application and supporting materials to us to be considered for funding. And of course, again, I want to emphasize, outside of a pre-application meeting, please feel free to contact me. Again, Amy Moyer. My email will be linked in the chat at the end of our program with questions about the program. With if you want to chat just high level about your project, please reach out. And with that, I do want to make sure we get time for Q&A. So I will turn it back over to our wonderful hosts, Zane and Marielle.
Right on time, Amy. Great job. And thank you for that overview. I think we're all excited to launch this program and get out there and start helping our water users and our communities throughout the district. So we've had a handful of questions pop up during tonight's webinar. I think a lot of them have been answered directly by panelists in the Q&A box. To start us off, I'll throw out one question for Bob Herford. Is Bob with us? I don't see him on screen. Maybe I should have chosen a different question to start with. But actually, why don't we go with one for Raquel?
I was trying to figure out.
Oh, there you go, Bob. Bob, I had a question about that slide you put up, and I don't think we need to put the slide on, but you showed the reservoir storage levels on the Grand Mesa that feed a lot of the viticulture and the agricultural operators in the North Fork and just downstream in general. Can you speak to the variability in the reservoir storage levels on the Mesa? It appeared as though there was a pretty clear trend with reservoirs to the east having nearly double the amount of storage compared to the reservoirs on the west end of the Grand Mesa. Is that hydrological? Is it temperature? What are the factors that play into that?
Well, we are used to seeing that trend, but in other words, the west end of the Grand Mesa kind of missing most of the snowpack. There are exceptions to that. In fact, 2019 was one of them. 2005 was huge. There was massive amounts of snow. In fact, Canna Creek runs into the lower Gunnison, and it's not, not pictured onto this. And so, but the general trend is you would see less snowpack from the west and more as you go up Surface Creek drainage. So, but what we're not used to seeing is these reservoirs not filling in the springtime.
Right.
And they almost always fill. And so seeing this was very shocking. And I went up there early this spring to check reservoir levels. And we measure all of the reservoir levels November 1. That's when we put them all to bed. Shut the head gates. And the season's over. They're going to spill over the winter. Some of the reservoirs were actually lower when I went up in March, and I'm scratching my head. That means there was no base flows, no no underlying flow below that snow. And we really need some monsoon moisture in the summer to turn this thing around. Yeah.
Thanks, Bob. I appreciate that. And
Yeah.
yeah, sorry to sober us all up again, but I think it's important for all of us to understand the challenges we're facing. Marielle, do you have a question you want to throw out?
Yeah, I'll thanks, Bob, for that. And I'll have a question focused on the selenium conversation, which was an exciting positive story that we got today. So and this could go out to, you know, Raquel, Ken, or DK. I know you all are working on this. But if a landowner has property that has high selenium areas and wants to make improvements, what should they do? Who should they contact?
I'll jump in first, and you know, Ken's actually a landowner down there, so he could probably speak to this. It really depends. It depends on what you're seeking to do. If you're a residential landowner, you know, CSU Extension has small acreage specialists. If you're a larger irrigator, NRCS and the conservation districts are really key partners in this effort. Or just call the River District. We'd be happy to talk to you and figure out exactly where to suggest that you go. And also, you know, the funding conversation would just begin. Amy and others could be part of that if you're actively seeking to improve your irrigation system. So great question, but sorry, the answer is a little bit vague. It really depends.
And DK, I would just add real quick, even if you're not in a high selenium area, the key is to maximize your water use efficiency, because then issues like drought, water quality, endangerment of fish species, they all start to become more manageable. And basically the whole basin can benefit from water use efficiency by everyone.
I'm going to throw out a question from John. This is probably best for Amy, but maybe DK wants to fill in as well, because it's a two-part question. Are there funding opportunities for small ranchers in Uray County to replace flood irrigation practices? The commenter notes that unfortunately there aren't a lot of fields that are flat enough for sprinklers, but wondering if there might be other options that might work for them. So Amy or DK, you guys want to jump in there?
Yeah, I'm happy to start and just say again, you know, our funding program is looking for projects small and large, and we do have two categories that I think would potentially align with that: productive agriculture and conservation and efficiency. So I would say, shoot me an email, we can talk more. And again, during our pre-application meetings, we typically bring some of our wonderful tech staff that you have heard from tonight to help us, again, just think about how to address the problem, think about different solutions to the challenges. And so maybe this is a great segue, DK, if you have something to add here too.
Yeah, and I think the question is also wondering about different practices, and it's not just sprinklers and it's not just pivot sprinklers. I mean, there's different kinds of sprinklers. There's pods, there's side rolls, of course, and there's a gated pipe, as I mentioned earlier, that you can take advantage of different topographies through, you know, some pretty simple, you might say, agricultural engineering practices, depending on your source of water. So there's a lot of technical solutions to go along, excuse me, with the financial solutions. Again, the NRCS and in your country, in the upper Uncompahgre and Uray County, would be the Chavano Conservation District. Very qualified folks can look at your situation. Each situation, of course, is unique. Put together a conservation plan. And we did this in the lower Gunnison, and unfortunately, we weren't able to cover all of Uray County, just the lower part, but same sort of techniques. And I definitely encourage you to reach out to those partners, as well as shoot us an email, and we'd be happy to talk to you more.
All right. DK, this is a question I think specific to your presentation that we had on the chat. Sonia Chavez, how much water was stored in the Crawford Clipper regarding regulating the reservoir, and what was the cost?
Yeah, those are good. The point I want to make here is these facilities can be pretty small, and this one is about 2 surface acres, about 5 to 6 feet deep at the deepest. So really only storing about 10 acre feet, maybe a little bit more. And the cost is variable. This one we did sort of on the cheap, but it was still with the pipe in and out and the valves about $350,000. So not cheap, but we believe that the cost benefit ratio justifies it. And of course, NRCS, who was the main funder, agreed. They have a very rigorous way of looking at the economics. So we would encourage other ditch companies to look at these kind of practices. They're very helpful, again, because they can be off channel. If you have some land adjacent to a ditch or a waterway, they can be environmentally friendly. They can actually improve some, open water habitat. It's not going to fit in all cases, but again, I appreciate the question, and I'll leave it there.
Thanks, DK. There was a question that was posted earlier, and I'm not seeing it in front of me now, but essentially the question was, are there plans to do more to prepare for a hotter, drier future rather than just hoping for monsoons? And I think that many of the presentations tonight focused on exactly that, what the district and what funding programs from the state and the federal government are doing to help our producers prepare for, and our water users prepare for a hotter, drier future that likely has less water in it. I'm going to turn that into my own question for David. You talked about the economic importance and the real and meaningful impact that companies like yours are playing on the Western Slope and throughout the state and really throughout the West. How are you all as an industry preparing, or what are you all doing and seeing, and how are you all looking at the threat of a hotter, drier future with less water for your business?
That's a good question, and it's the answer is like any good attorney says it depends, right? So it depends where you are. I think a lot of our customers are in the Rocky Mountain region, and they all have a different approach to it. But it's definitely affecting dealers and our retailers. When we have low water, anecdotally, the early season's good and the late season's really bad, and it's the opposite with high water. And so I think the retailers really watch water levels, Snowtel in particular, because of that. And so it's not a specific answer, but I think that it's multifaceted. Our dealers, they watch it like hawks, because a lot of them have their guiding services and other things. So it's all interrelated, I think.
Right. Yeah, no, that's a great answer. I appreciate that, David. And that's something we at the district look at all the time, is that it is all interrelated, and a hotter, drier future is going to impact agricultural production in just as it's going to impact non-consumptive water users that rely on water in the river. So appreciate your presentation. Bob, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to jump in there. I've been typing answers to some of these questions, if you don't mind, because it sounded like some of them were addressed to me. But to answer that question, and I'm not a farmer, but my observation is that farmers are very resilient. They're used to change. They're used to being put in positions of hardship, and they deal with it. It's, in my opinion, the vulnerabilities lie with the small communities that have small water systems. And what I'm seeing, like, for example, the Orchard City Irrigation District and the town of Cedar Ridge, and there's some other small water systems. They rely on springs and stored water on the Grand Mesa, and then up above Peonia. So these are very small water systems that they need to figure out ways to harden their system, like plan ahead, figure out ways that they can purchase sufficiently senior irrigation water rights, and perhaps use them in creative ways by doing a loan of water right. I don't know, even changes of water rights to municipal, things like that, storage projects. But that's what I'm observing. That's what I have observed in the Gunnison Basin. Some of the towns like the city of in the entire Uncompahgre Valley. I mean, the Project 7 is the water treatment plant for the entire valley. It gets its water out of the Gunnison River. When the Gunnison finally dries up, yeah, then yeah, we all have a problem. But you know, that as long as the Aspinall unit is there, and you know, that's really not going to happen. But so I tried to answer the question in that fashion, if that's okay.
Yeah, you did a great job. Thanks, Bob.
Thank you.
We are right at the bottom of the hour, and know that folks need to get to dinner and their families. I think Marielle was going to give a quick overview or a pitch for the Gunnison River Festival. So I'll turn it over to her.
Thanks, Zane. Yeah, just really quick, I know folks are signing off. First of all, if your question wasn't answered, just wanted to remind you that the emails for our presenters are in the chat box, so feel free to reach out to them directly. But yes, we'd like to remind people that the Gunnison River Festival will be kicking off tomorrow, June 11th. So visit their website, which is GunnisonRiverFestival.com for more information. It's a 3-day festival celebrating the Gunnison River, and it's a great opportunity to learn more about our rivers through educational seminars, dry land and inflow clinics, and competitive live and virtual races will take place, which sounds pretty great. We also want to remind you that we're hosting our final State of the River webinar. The Colorado River District will be hosting that on the White River next Tuesday, June 15th at 6 p.m. Mountain Time. And you can register via our website or the registration link, which I believe has also been put in the chat box. So those are the upcoming events. But we want to thank all our presenters tonight, and thank you all for coming out and joining us, and for all the work everyone is doing to keep the Gunnison River Basin and our Colorado River District thriving. So thank you all so much.
Thank you all. Have a great night.